He is a Tibetan legal scholar and an expert on Tibet and international human rights law. Educated at a Tibetan refugee high school in Darjeeling, India, he earned his doctorate in law and LLM from Harvard University on a Fulbright scholarship. He is currently a research fellow at East Asian Legal Studies program at Harvard Law School. He has organized 7 conferences between Chinese and Tibetan scholars, including a meeting between the Dalai Lama and 100 Chinese scholars at Harvard University in 2009. He's here to present his views on the case of Tibet. Please put your hands together for our next speaker, Dr. Lobsang Sangay.
Yushan, let's go. So now it's good we are having conference here, and we're also reaching now bridge conference, trying to bridge. And because talking about food and all, I want to find out how many of you have eaten Chinese food in your lifetime. Please raise your hand. Is there anyone who hasn't eaten Chinese food in their lifetime? No. Okay, how many of you have watched Chinese movie? So almost universal. How many of you have eaten Tibetan food? Well, kind of 50, yes, 56. How many of you watched Tibetan movie? It seems as though there's a vast majority who are eating Chinese food and watching Chinese movie. So these people are trying to bridge the gap, so to speak. And I think there's some more people who need to eat Tibetan food and watch Tibetan movies, it seems.
Can we count the Hollywood movies?
Oh, that's true, yeah. The Hollywood movies, Brad Pitt. That's true, yeah. Yeah, that might distort, I think it's a bridge between Tibetans and Chinese. I think Hollywood and Bollywood has no place today, it seems. That will complicate all the superpowers coming and they're giving their own interpretation. Yeah, that's very complicated. Because often I get this request among Chinese and Tibetan scholars. They say, you really should not bring American. Why? Because we don't want to hear Tibetan, you should do this, Chinese, you should do that, sometimes, So often I try to make it. Of course, I invited you, June, drive. So you're an exception.
I'm honored.
Yes. But then they prefer to talk among themselves because ultimately it's our issue, So we have to own it. We have to talk among ourselves and try to sort it out. So try to bridge the gap, So I often, because when you meet some Chinese friends, they say, oh, I've been to Tibet. I know the situation, there is no problem. How? Because I spent 1 week, I met some Tibetans, and they say no problem. I say, okay, first tell me, where did you book your ticket? Or Chinese travel agency. Okay. Where did you stay? Or Chinese-owned hotel in Lhasa. Okay. Where did you eat most of the time? Chinese restaurants. Okay. Who was your tour guide? A Chinese tour guide. Okay. Where did they take you? Oh, briefly to Chokhang, then rest to all the China area, and then the Chinese areas, and then to monasteries and all is all controlled. So essentially, you went to Tibet, Lhasa, ate Chinese food, stayed in Chinese hotel, tour guide was Chinese, so your friends were Chinese, you came back. I said, why did you go to Tibet then? It's better off you should have gone to Shanghai, At least you won't get this, altitude sickness, right? If you go to Tibet, you're supposed to stay in Tibetan hotel. Maybe you're a little scared. Hey, Tibetans, they don't like us. But the scary part, the fear in you, the anxiousness in you, is the experience the tourist you're supposed to have, right? A little bit, And if you eat Tibetan food, especially Tibetan tea, you have love and hate relationship. You love it or hate it, Because it's more like a soup than a tea, so you should be pre-warned, So if you hate it, you can say, I went to Tibet, that bloody tea, I really hated it, That's the experience, If you go and if you had Chinda, the same Chinese tea, you are better off staying in Beijing and drinking Chinese tea, So if you want a real interpretation of what's going on in Tibet, you should try to hire a Tibetan tour guide. And we'll tell you, perhaps in Chinese language, for fear of arrest, but might tell you a little bit of different interpretation. So next time when you go to Tibet, hopefully, you will stay with Tibetan. There will be no harm to Han Chinese, So try all that, and you will have a taste of what Tibet and Tibetan people is actually. Because sometimes they say, oh, I really talk to Tibetans. They say they have no problem. And so do you realize that you are Han Chinese, the elite or the master race, and you are asking a Tibetan, hey, you have any problem? Same Han Chinese dressed in a police uniform, same Han Chinese dressed in the intelligence, the work in the intelligence, and same Han Chinese is the party secretary, same Han Chinese gives order for Tibetan arrest. So how come when Han Chinese goes to a Tibetan and asks, do you have any problem, you expect him or her to say, oh, I have a big problem. What is the problem? You are the problem, You can't expect that, right? So, even if you ask them in Chinese, 你是中国人吗? It's in Chinese, right? Are you Chinese? And very likely a Tibetan will say, how? Because that's a politically correct thing to say, yes. But if you ask the same question in English, are you Chinese? Oh, Tibetan will qualify that answer by saying, well, I'm Tibetan from China. Well, you didn't say, yes, I'm Chinese. How come? No, I'm Tibetan. If you ask in Tibetan, can I give me yinbe? Same question. He'll say, me, nga pebe. No, I'm Tibetan. So who am I? Oh, you are. Can I give me de? You are Chinese, And can I gage yagre nga pege yagre? Can I gana nide nga pe nide? Essentially, you speak in Chinese. I speak in Tibetan. You are from China, and I'm from Tibet. In a sense, Tibetans don't have a word that combines us as one people, as one country, or one language. Now, that does not necessarily mean we don't like Chinese, or we don't want Chinese, or we don't want China. It's just the lexicon, in our minds. That's the language we talk. That's the language, and that's the understanding we have had for 2,000-3,000 years. So it's not in resentment or trying to differentiate purposely. That's how we think. So I hope Chinese friends will try to understand. For everything that you think is true, there is another perspective as well, a Tibetan perspective. So I hope in this, throughout the day, you get to hear a Tibetan perspective. So because I have had some experience talking to Chinese friends for the last 15 years and having organized many conferences, having taken trouble of inviting Chinese scholars from Beijing and different parts of China, I have some understanding, and I have met hundreds, maybe I can say even thousands of Chinese students and scholars, and the narrative from my Chinese friends always goes like this: well, Tibet, and it seems like Tibetans became part of China or joined the family during Tang Dynasty. Why? Well, Tibetan princess married, Chinese princess Wang Chen married Tibetan king. So Wang Chen, it kind of became family. But how do you define family, Did you know that there was another princess from Nepal who was the elder queen, who was also married by Tibetan king Songtsen Gampo? Oh, I didn't know that. If you go to Chokhang, the Nepali princess sits on the right-hand side of the king, and the Chinese princess sits on the left side of the king, which means she is the Junei queen. Oh, I didn't know that. Or actually, there is a treaty during Tang Dynasty in 821, 822 signed, which says that Tibetans will be happy in Tibet, Chinese will be happy in China. Signed by Chinese representative and Tibetan representative. Oh, I didn't know that, that the China in fact recognized Tibet as an independent entity, if not a state, at least an entity, and there was a mutual recognition. This treaty stands in the form of stone pillar even today. Oh, this, I didn't know that. I thought they just married and became part of the family, Okay, Tang Dynasty is problematic. What about Yuan Dynasty? That we have a slam dunk case. Yuan Dynasty, Tibet joined part of China. It's Kublai Khan the Great. Excuse me, but when you say Yuan Dynasty, did you mean Mongolian who ruled over China, who occupied rest of China? Oh, no, 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 no. Well, they became part of China. But then it seems the Outer Mongolia is an independent country now, you know. Aren't they entitled to be the descendant or the successor of, you know, Yuan dynasty if they ought to be claimed? Well, I don't, this Soviet, you know, played some tricks and got, you know,